sitting on a truck that's driving painstakingly slow across a narrow dirt road alongside a steep ravine at 4,000 meters in the Peruvian Andes. One mistake by the driver and we will all be dead. It is 2006. My friend Rob and I had spent the last couple of weeks birding the vast Amazonian lowlands, and now we are hitchhiking back to civilization. The sun has set hours ago. We are both shivering from the blistering cold. Do you think James Clemens had a similar experience during his big year? Rob asks. Who is James Clemens? I reply. Well, James Clemens is the big year world record holder. In 1989, he observed a staggering 3,662 species of birds on 6 continents in 1 calendar year. This is the first time that I hear of the term big year. And right there and then, on that truck, high in the Peruvian Andes, I make a promise to myself that one day I will be the big year world record holder. This is who you're looking at right now. I kept my promise and I made my dream reality. In 2016, after 2 years of intensive planning, I traveled across 6 continents through 40 different countries, and I counted no less than 6,852 species of bird, of the roughly 10,700 species that are currently known to science. Like this majestic Saurus crane on the Great Indian Plains, with its 1 meters and 56 centimeters, it is the tallest standing non-flightless bird of all. Or this spectacular southern crowned pigeon in the remote lowland rainforest of Papua New Guinea. It is a pigeon the size of a turkey. Or the rare shoebill, a stork-like bird that makes the papyrus swamps of Uganda its home. And of course, the horned guam, a mythical beast that lives in the cloud forest of Guatemala and southwest Mexico. To see it, I had to walk the Sendejo de las Lágrimas, the Trail of Tears, a trail that is notorious among birdwatchers for being one of the steepest, muddiest, and most dangerous treks in the world. I started climbing at 2:30 in the morning on a pitch black night with only my headlight to lead the way. I climbed from 1,000 to 2,500 meters in just a couple hours, but eventually I found the beast. It all started when I was just a little kid, about 2 decades ago, growing up in the coastal town of Scheveningen. You see, back then I was already fascinated by nature, and especially birds. I was reading a feature about seasonal birds, my favorite birdwatching magazine, and I read that with northwesterly storms, seabirds like gannets and jagers could be observed along the Dutch coast. So I looked through my window and I saw dark rain clouds rushing overhead. My heart skipped a beat. So I rushed up to my mom's study and I said, Mom, we need to go." "What is it, son? Is the house on fire?" she replied. It took some persuasion, but eventually my mom gave in and drove me to the harbor of Scheveningen. Together, we walked the pier all the way to the green lighthouse at the far end. But besides some gulls, I didn't see any seabirds, so to be honest, I was a little disappointed. But there, sheltered from the wind behind the lighthouse, sat a man on a folding chair in a green raincoat, hunched over a telescope. "Are you a birdwatcher?" I asked. He smiled and pointed at the scope. So I closed my right eye and pressed the left one against the eyepiece. Right at that exact moment, I saw my first Arctic jager, a beautiful, elegant seabird that I never dreamed of seeing with my own eyes, let alone just a stone throw away from my house in Scheveningen. From that point on, I went birding every day, before school, after school, and to be honest, quite often during school. Because of my obsession with birds, I was of course a bit of a nerd during high school. You see, birdwatching simply wasn't cool. When I went birding, I had my binoculars safely tucked under my jacket so that my classmates wouldn't see me as a weirdo. I found this frustrating sometimes. Why was something that I loved doing so much considered to be weird? Why was I the only birdwatcher at my school? Why had my classmates seemingly lost all their interest in nature? You see, I believe that every child is a naturalist, and not much is needed to stimulate their interest in the natural world. In my case, a fishing net, a bucket, and a magnifying glass was sufficient. I would fish for salamanders in our garden and look for insects under flower pots, which I would later study with my magnifying glass. It is up to us, parents, grandparents, teachers, to stimulate this naturalist in every child at an early age, so that they don't lose their connection with nature. Are there any birdwatchers in the audience? Two. Well, trust me, you will all be birdwatchers after my talk. Do you know why? Birds are nature's silver lining. They are its finest creation. In fact, they are so successful that they colonize the entire planet. They live on the North and the South Pole, on the highest mountains, in the driest deserts, and even on the most isolated oceanic island. Bar-headed geese, for example, have been observed migrating over the Mount Everest summit. And just imagine a day in the park without birdsong. Trust me, the eerie silence will make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Birds make it easy to keep our connection with nature because they are everywhere around us. Does anybody know this bird? It is a goldcrest. It is just 9 centimeters and weighs as little as 5 grams, which is about the same as, let's say, 1 sugar cube. Still, it migrates every year from the Siberian taiga across the North Sea all the way to its wintering grounds right here in the Netherlands. Or this common swift. This bird migrates to Mozambique and back every year. It spends almost its entire life on the wing and only touches solid grounds for breeding. It eats, mates, and it even sleeps on the wing. Isn't that amazing? Sadly, we are losing our planet's birds at an alarming rate. We are destroying and poisoning the ecosystems on which they depend. We are killing their main food source, insects, with our industrialized farming, and we are slaughtering them during their migration. In the Mediterranean alone, millions of birds are killed annually. In most cases, not even for food, but for fun. You see, birds tell us when an ecosystem is out of balance. They warn us when their habitat is dying, but still we fail to listen. In fact, we've gone so far that 1 out of 8 bird species is now listed as threatened, which is well over 1,000 species. I strongly believe that children hold the future and the fate of our planet's birds in their hands. That is why it is essential that we stimulate their interest in nature, because only when they see the beauty and the value of nature, they will later feel the responsibility to take care for her. Is there anybody who knows this bird? Nobody? It is a white-bellied Cyclodes. And how many do you think there are left? Maybe 100,000? Maybe 10,000? Maybe as few as 1,000? Well, in fact, there are only 200 or less, which is about half of all the people here in the audience. It only lives around isolated peat bogs at 5,000 meters in the Peruvian Andes, and sadly, it is rapidly decreasing. Its habitat is being drained for copper mining, and the last remaining peat on which this bird depends is being harvested for mushroom growing. To see this bird, I had to drive up from sea level to 5,000 meters in just one day. And as I watched it, foraging at my feet, totally oblivious to my presence, I felt overwhelmed by emotion. Maybe it was the lack of oxygen at 5,000 meters, or Maybe it was the extreme lack of sleep. Or just maybe I could not shake the feeling of guilt that we, as humans, are directly responsible for this marvelous bird's continuous decline. You see, sometimes I feel like a war journalist, not one that has visited Darfur or Yemen, but one that has seen the most threatened ecosystems and birds around the world. And therefore, I have a great responsibility to tell all of you their stories and to give them a right to exist. Because why would this white-bellied Synchlodes be any less important than an elephant, a tiger, or a gorilla? For this reason, I'm an ambassador for BirdLife International. This fantastic organization is the most important safety net for our planet's most threatened birds. Through immediate conservation, habitat restoration, captive breeding, and working with local communities instead of against them, these conservationists are doing everything they can to save these critically endangered birds from extinction. And trust me, it works. In the last 4 years alone, BirdLife managed to downlist 24 critically endangered species, which means that they are now less endangered than before, all thanks to these conservation measures. Like this beautiful northern bald ibis, a bird that was down to just several dozens of breeding pairs. Now it is a regular sight again in the coastal dunes of Morocco. So yes, we are losing nature and wildlife at an alarming rate. But we now also have the knowledge, the science, and the tools to do something about it. And we have the responsibility to do so for our children and grandchildren. And when we save these magnificent feathered creatures, we also save the ecosystems on which they depend. And ultimately also ourselves. Because we depend on those very same ecosystems for the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. Thank you.